Hello, Guilty Feminist. This is Deborah. Well, I was extremely excited to interview Rose McGowan, star of Scream, Charmed, Grindhouse, and many, many more. Also a leading light of the MeToo movement. I can't wait for you to hear this episode because I thought Rose was incredibly insightful and the conversation was really, really interesting. And the buzz in the room on the night was really palpable. I'm glad to be able to invite you into this. Just before we get to the podcast, we have our Edinburgh Festival preview shows coming up at Soho Theatre in London. 7th of July, that's tomorrow night. It's Sarah Barron, Reb Day, Freya Parker, Anna Leon Brophy. And on the 14th of July next week, it's Alice Fraser, Katie Pritchard, Rosie Holt, and Jess Robinson. Book now because you'll see 5 minutes of people's Edinburgh show. If you can't get to Edinburgh, this is Edinburgh in one night. If you can get to Edinburgh, it's a taster, so you'll be able to go, oh, I want to go to that show. Then we're off to the Isle of Wight for the Ventnor Fringe on the 18th of July. And then it's the Edinburgh Fringe from the 20th to the 23rd of August. Book now for all of those. More London Road to Gilead shows coming up soon. Thank you to everybody who came to the incredible Open Space Day. We've had some wonderful projects come out of it. If you could do me a huge favour, if you're listening to this, if you could quickly press the subscribe or follow button, that makes a huge, huge, huge difference. As does rating and reviewing any episode, the whole season, whatever you want to do. You might have done it before. It doesn't matter. You can do it again. It really helps people find a podcast. It's a great way to support, as is our Patreon, in which case you get ad-free episodes. Sign up to the mailing list on guiltyfeminist.com if you'd like to hear about more shows and Road to Gilead projects, shows, Open Space Days. All the podcasts are free. There's a whole 10-year back catalogue. You can listen to them all right now. My book is not free. Please buy it. You can afford to now. It's in paperback. But you could also buy my book, The Guilty Feminist. Both of them make great gifts if you've already got them for yourself. All great ways to support us and the podcast. And speaking of the podcast, let's crack on with it. Live from the Charleston Festival, the Spontaneity Shop presents The Guilty Feminist with me, Deborah Frances-White, and my very special guest, Rose McGowan.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Charleston. My name is Melissa. I'm Artistic Director of the festival. And welcome to a very special conversation with two women who have done so much to challenge the status quo, Deborah Frances-White and Rose McGowan. Deborah is an award-winning writer and comedian, best known for her hit podcast, The Guilty Feminist, which reaches a global community and has had over 180 million downloads to date. It might even be more by now. I don't know how up-to-date that was.
It's around there.
Amazing, yeah. What began as a podcast about the contradictions and imperfections of feminism has become even more urgent in today's turbulent and toxic world. Deborah's book, The Guilty Feminist, was a Sunday Times bestseller, and her new book, 6 Conversations We're Scared to Have, was described by Gillian Anderson as an essential guide in today's polarised society. Tonight, Deborah is joined by Rose McGowan, actor, writer, director, and activist. Long before many others were prepared to speak publicly, Rose challenged some of the most powerful structures in Hollywood, and her testimony became one of the catalysts for the global MeToo movement. But her story stretches far beyond that moment. From an unconventional childhood growing up in a religious sect to her recent work as an acclaimed filmmaker and musician, she has consistently refused easy narratives or to be defined by her past. So tonight, to explore the personal cost of speaking out, but also the incredible possibilities that emerge when people do, please welcome Deborah Frances-White and Rose McGowan.
Rose, I feel very, very honoured to interview you tonight, or chat to you, really. It's a conversation, because you being such a dynamic and instrumental force in the Me Too movement really changed my life very dramatically, actually. And I don't know if people say this to you or how they say it to you, but I felt like before that I was always disbelieved, not just about assault and things of that magnitude, but just how different it was and how difficult it was being a woman, in my case, in comedy. So firstly, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you for that bravery, because it did shift something. really means a lot to me. It shifted something significant. Can I ask, how are you? How are you now?
I am here with my fluffy emotional support dog. How are you?
I'm very well. I meant to say we should introduce the real star of the show.
The real star. They do
Polita.
say in Hollywood. First of all, let me just say thank you. That's a beautiful, beautiful introduction. I'm so happy to see such. It makes my heart happy to see all of you here, and I'm so honored to be speaking with you. And thank you for that. This is Perlita, by the way.
Perlita,
Little
yes.
Pearl, little ruffian, and I started seeing just pattern recognition, a lot with language and a lot with sect-like language, and the mechanisms of control and how they spanned across all top levels and top tiers of society. And businesses, and business and corporation and capitalism and all these different entities. And I wanted to see if I could just shake the power structure enough. My goal was really, I called it a cultural reset. I just wanted lenses to shift by about 10%. And I didn't know where that would lead. Mm-hmm. And then when I shaved my head, one is a way of, no, I'm not going back to Hollywood. You're really going forward. You've been shaking the ground, and now it's time. Publicly. And then the side effect was that people could actually hear what came out of my mouth. And I was very curious, could I get this so other women, if they want to shave their head, great. But if they don't, can they be listened to? Because I found I was never actually saying anything different than I used to say. Or would say when I had kind of glossy Hollywood hair, which was part of the job requirement, I called it deep cover, just with a lot of lipstick. And it was, anyway, so that makes my heart happy.
I really appreciate you doing that, because I cannot pull off the number one. I just will never.
I can't
be able
anymore
to.
either, alas.
I could never. I just don't have the skull for it. And I think that what you're saying is very interesting, that if a woman looks like the stereotype of the Hollywood beauty, that is her main worth. That's what's projected upon her by the Hollywood establishment.
I think if a woman looks like a woman, or just looked like anyway, just anyone, not glossy. I happen to be a ramped up version of what maybe women look like, but just anybody embodying this a femme physicality. It's just easy to just like like what is it in the old cartoons when they just hear like wah 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 wah. And I was curious, and I have actually heard from so many different sectors, women in different levels all over the world, saying that actually they were quite shocked that they too had been saying the same things in business and in legal fields and all these different things in academia, and now someone was registering what they were saying. And secondary to that, one thing that did, sorry for the side quest here, but I was really, I would say, to put a pin on the sexual assault component, that is universal and that does not belong just to women. And that was something that was the staggering levels of that. There are some unicorns in the world, and go forth and prosper, because that is the rarity. And I just think for everybody to be like, here's the shame, I'm going to put it on your doorstep. That was not mine to carry. Goodbye.
Mm-hmm. Yes, as Giselle Pellico says, shame must change sides.
Yes.
And we must not allow it to weigh us down, because that's what predators do. They abuse you, and then they say you should feel ashamed. And the shame is luggage. It weighs you down, and therefore they feel safe that you will never open up, because then you have to admit, this is what happened to me, this is my story. And I feel like that's something that's underestimated. A friend of mine told me a story about how something that happened to her as a powerful man, and she said, the next thing I wanted to do, I just thought, he's going to do it. I've said no, he's going to do it, there's no way out. I'm going to pretend I'm into it. And then immediately she said, I wanted a second date, so that my story was not that this had happened. My story was like, oh, I had a bit of an awkward first encounter, but then we dated for a few weeks, and then I just don't have to live with the story. I don't have to be a victim. I don't have to be a survivor. And it took her a long time to acknowledge, even to herself, and to say out loud to herself what she knew full well had happened. And that's a really interesting thing, the way that we shape the narrative around something that we feel is a more palatable version that doesn't impact our identity. I think the reason Melissa asked me actually to interview you is you were raised in a cult, and I was too, to some extent from my teens. How do you think that experience of being raised in a cult as a child has helped you identify more what you were experiencing as a young woman?
Well, first I would say actually being here reminds me a lot of where I grew up.
Lock the doors.
No. Beautiful, behind walls, taller walls, but I grew up in a palazzo with Utopian artists, and they were trying for a different society, and it was post-Vietnam, and they wanted a different way of living. And unfortunately, the people that really at the highest level founded it had a different kind of Machiavellian idea of what to do with this thing. But the children born into it, us, didn't. I was actually more offended by the outside world because I saw that we saved you from the cult. And I thought, but you are a cult. And I just see it replicated in so many ways. If you are in a group, and it can be a group of friends, it can be your family, it can be a relationship, and if you speak to something that, even have a question about something, basically you're met with, you're disavowed, you no longer exist in that reality, you're cut off from your family and friends, you're cut off from any kind of structure, you're no longer in this relationship, we will no longer have you with us. You do not get to sit at this table. We don't know you. We might have loved you for your entire life, but not now. And I find that to be hair-raising. I find that is the pattern of a cult more than anything.
Yes, I think a very useful definition of a cult is any group that won't let you leave with your dignity intact. And the way out, I was in a religious cult, and from the age of around 14, and I had to get out on my own in my 20s. And the experience of leaving, and because in this organization, you must not have any friends outside a band, but the punishment for dissenting or just wanting to go, disobeying, anything like that is shunning.
Right.
So
that sounds like Hollywood.
Right. And so you can't get out. They won't let you out. If you escape, then you will be shunned by everyone. The first thing you'll be is shamed, and then you'll be shunned. This book that I wrote, 6 Conversations We're Scared to Have, is about how I started to see that model that I had escaped in my 20s in the world around me, because whatever community that you were in, whatever values they held, or whatever ideas that they believed in, suddenly you said something that was slightly other than that on social media, and there would be a whole pile-on of you can't say that, and now you must apologize. If you will not be shamed, you will be shunned. And I was like, I've lived in this before. I don't want to live in this again. And that's the impetus, and I wrote about some of those experiences in the book. But the way you talk about the group that you were in, you do have some love for it. Like there was some beauty in it. Can you just tell us a little bit more about what that was like?
I mean, and they do say never to work with animals or children because they will steal the show. Fact. Perlita? Siéntate. Sorry.
Is Perlita a Mexican dog?
She's actually from Cuba, but we live 100 miles off the coast of Cuba. Perlita, sit. She will not sit.
So does she speak Spanish rather than English?
Sí.
Oh,
Perla.
I just love that so much.
So to say, serious subject. Yes.
Just saying, who are you people talking about cults?
And
You're making me come over here.
I know. She's like, do you need my help? I do. I have love for it. Yes, actually, I do. I think the one great. You will not hump my leg right now. It was because of how the children were raised. And the one thing I am grateful for is they did one, there were different levels. The Children of God, Bambini di Dio, in Italian, they had 130 chapters at their highest point. And there were people that had horrific stories. Mm-hmm. And that they were out, the Phoenix family, actually, River, Joaquin, they were in the Venezuelan jungle, a completely different kind of work experience. This one was, I was in a palazzo in Tuscany, mainly because I was conceived in Maidstone, where they tried to do the founding of Children of God here, and the UK government was not having it. So we were deported when I think my mother was 6 months pregnant with me.
Oh, wow.
And so
Your mother was 6 months pregnant with you here, and they deported her.
Yes.
What? Because they didn't want her having a baby in the UK.
No, because they were, I imagine, trying to turn the good citizens of Maidstone, Kent, into children of God members.
I
Didn't go
see.
well. Tea and sympathy, not there.
Yeah.
But
we've become a lot better with immigrants.
Yes. Well, depends on where you are here.
Yeah,
but yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that was sarcasm. But so she was trying to make something happen to the UK, and then got deported, went to Italy.
My father, yes. So I was born there. There was a Duke. Stop, Perlita. There was a Duke, El Duce Emanuele Cannavaro, and he had an amazing palazzo and a library from the 17th century. And so I grew up with free range reading. That's how I learned, on books from 1600s, 1700s, and onwards. And for me, it was different. And they also had a thing where they wanted to see what these children were like if they didn't, actually, it was interesting, enforce a gender. If they didn't do anything with mirrors, if they didn't do anything, they didn't tell it. We were raised to be superminds.
Right.
And so for me, that was very powerful. And I formed myself, or was formed, as I later learned, once I got sent to the US, and they're like, we saved you. I was like, thank you, but no. And then I got sent to military schools, and that was immediately when they were consistently saying, we saved you from a cult, I just was seeing like cult. You're physically holding a hand on my chest, and you're making me talk to a flag.
And how is that different? And that's always the question. When you're in a paradigm, in that paradigm, everything makes sense. And it's so easy not to question the rules and the structures and the norms of your own paradigm. And it's so important that we do. And so that really is the answer to the question, how did being raised in something that when you left it, you started to be told this is a cult, help you understand the same cult-like attributes?
Because I didn't actually know the full scale of what I had grown up in, or its power, or the various things that it had done at that point. I was 10 and a half. But I was savvy enough and understood enough that I could see the manipulation of the minds going on around me, and that they sent me to 7 of these military base schools in 2.5 years. And the consistent thing, one, my highest grade point average was 0.00, because I would just raise my hand and I said, I've read other history, you're lying to your citizens. So I was really popular. I was very, very popular. They loved me. And I just kind of caused them to glitch.
Why did your parents send you to a military school?
Yeah, my grandfather was fairly high up in the Navy, and when basically they had many, many children, that was a thing in there that was espoused. My father actually didn't come over for another year after me. They could just kind of send us piecemeal. I got sent there, brothers and sisters were sent here, blah, 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 like that. And it was just the start. And, there was just, yeah.
So you had been with your mother and father in a kind of closed community until you were 10. And you didn't speak English there, you spoke Italian.
I understood English.
But it was not your first language.
No.
And then why did your parents send you alone back to the United States of America?
It was just, they had no money. You weren't allowed to earn money. They were completely dependent on the group overall. So the first thing that was taken, there was the escape night, and we were taken to a safe house, and just people appeared, disappeared. That was not uncommon. There were definitely, when I grew up in that organization, things that were quite hair-raising. I was more of kind of, I think, a spy in some ways. I was taught to listen at doors, and if people were trying to overthrow the kind of dominant power structure, which would be my father and the Duke, then I was to report back. But I would usually kind of just, didn't. You weren't also allowed to have anything imperfect on you. I had a wart on my thumb at one point, and I should just stop talking. Do you know I had a wart on my thumb, Pearlie? How do you feel about that? I'm sorry. Someone actually from Charleston organization called and said, will you be bringing your dog on stage? And I thought, oh, nobody's ever asked me that. That's a grand idea. And I think...
If you're listening to this as a podcast, what you should understand is that every time we stop talking, it's because Rosa's dog has done something incredibly adorable. Or
And now she's center stage, staring out at her.
yes, adoring audience.
I think
wagging
she's
her
actually
tail.
made more for the footlights than I. I think she would have enjoyed that lifestyle better than I do.
Jeez,
did.
Melissa's asking, do you want her to take?
Let's try.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's going to go. Perla, stop. Subes? Okay. You're
Nobody
gonna go
wants her
here.
to go. Nobody wants
Is there a way you
this.
could sit there so she can just watch?
She is
Don't.
so
Good
sweet.
girl. Good girl.
Oh, Polita. No.
I am
Nothing we
rightly
do-
embarrassed, but thank you.
Nothing we do or say will be as interesting as what
No,
Polita is
it's
doing.
impossible. That old adage, it was Lionel Barrymore, actually, Drew Barrymore's uncle, great uncle, I think, that said that do not ever work with children or dogs. They will always upstage you, and that is, in fact, a fact.
That is, in fact, very true.
Deservedly so.
Yes. So you were raised spying at doors, listening in to see if anyone was trying to overthrow the powers that be. And one of the powers that be was your father.
He was a very interesting man. He was a rascal of the first class, I would say. Definitely. And a wild character. An incredible fine artist. Really, truly incredible. Like a wild imagination and the technical skill paired. Like really unparalleled. But this environment, the kitchen, it reminds me of kind of a smaller version of where I grew up. After that, I got sent to tract government homes that were quite hideous in the U.S. So I've had both ends of the spectrum. But yes, it was. He also, I'm sorry to the men here, but that male ego on this man was quite spectacular. He was. He liked to be referred to, he called himself God with a small g. That was his way of staying humble. To which, when I was 14, I had a T-shirt made that said on the front, "You're born again," and on the back I had printed, "Now die again." Little punk brat.
Wow, so lowercase divine. But you then went to the United States of America on your own. Is this because your parents woke up and thought we better get out of this?
I think the whole thing just came collapsing down on them. I don't know, I think there was there's a book called Chaos. It's very, very interesting. It came out last year, and it actually talks about a lot of, CIA actually had a lot of doings with creating a lot of these communes and then labeling them cults by the time people came out. And it was a way of basically steering the public and saying, do not step out of your lane, go back into suburbia. You can try a utopian lifestyle, it will not work. You will fail.
Oh, so you think the CIA created some of them in order to demonstrate because of this?
Because post-Vietnam, people had the number of the government. They weren't buying what was being sold, and they needed to get, it only takes 3 generations to make people forget, so, yeah.
That's such an interesting parallel. Apparently, Polita would like to come back now. That's what the message I'm getting.
Perla.
Yes. She's not shy, is she, at all? She loves the spotlight. Hello, darling. Hello. That is such a parallel with Charleston, because the Bloomsbury group came here like pacifists in the First World War. And Melissa, who's the AD of this festival, do step in if I'm getting anything wrong. But they were pacifists, and in the First World War, one way to get out of active service was to farm vegetables. So they were here farming vegetables. But it also was something of a polycule. I think there is does everyone know what a polycule is?
I don't.
Okay. It's like, when people are polyamorous, and sometimes they live in a little cule. They live in a little club. So you might not everyone might partner everybody, or everyone might partner everyone, but it's not necessarily 6 in a bed every night. But it's a communal feel where maybe you're dating 2 people, or you're in a less unsexual romance with this one, and so on and so on. And I feel like
that is definitely
similar.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think here there was a lot of polypan love going on. And that was seen as very normal because the truth is, every 50 years, young people invent free love. And it's incredibly important that they believe they are the first and only ones to have done so. And you can look at it, you can set your watch by it. And sort of what's happening now, which seems like this massive reinvention, of course, happened in the 60s. It was still going on, presumably decades later when you came along. And we go right back to then, this period when the Bloomsbury Group were here. And later tonight, I hope I get to come with you on a tour of the house, because if you ever get the opportunity to tour the house in the dark, sometimes they take artists around because we don't get time to do it in the day. And I tell you, the sparks that are there, it feels so sexy and so artistic and so exciting in that house. It really, really does.
This is how I wound up with 7 brothers and sisters.
Very possibly. So you then go back to the United States on your own and get sent to a military academy. Did this disrupt your attachments in such a way that was a horrendous experience for you?
I think attachment, I've later learned about attachment theory and all these things. That wasn't really, there were so many mothers. And oddly, all the women in the group were called nannies. And so I think the children were communally raised. So I don't think attachment was a real... I actually didn't understand that or know about that for quite a long time. And it definitely illuminates many reasons why I've lived my life the way I've lived. I don't want to go down that road.
That's interesting. So the It Takes a Village idea was made manifest in this commune, that all of them... No, you didn't call your biological mother Mom. You called all of the women nannies. What were the men called?
I never knew after God with a small G. I didn't ask anybody else.
Wow. But you didn't... Did you call your father Dad? Or was that not...
I don't remember there. In fact, the majority of my memories there are, and I have very clear ones because I was taught to read full books by age 2. They were very forward thinking in that way, in a lot of ways. But I think these were quite sexy people. My mother and father and the group, they definitely went for a certain type. And I think they, looking back when you're a child, they seem like these adults, right? But then you're like, you were 21, you were 22, you were 23, and now you're in this extraordinary circumstance. What led up to my father being there was he was in the last month of the draft for Vietnam, and at that point everybody knew really, like, we're gonna die, and this is all, none of this is real, and this is a systemic lie, and they're slaughtering us and them for this. And so my father realized there was no vegetable out clause for the war at that time. And so he put LSD in his commander's cups. They called a meeting, and he acted so crazy. He jumped on the table. He put liquid LSD in their water jug, and took it himself before he went in, and stood on the table, throwing things around, screaming, just being so insane to do whatever he could to not go. And then they put him in the naval prison for about 6 months.
Good Lord.
And the first night, I guess they waterboarded him, but he was very high. And so he did repeat, I think someone on the paperwork that I found was that I think at around 172, he repeated, "I will not kill another race for this country."
Wow.
So I do come from unique perspectives on things. Yes, his ego, and he looked a bit like a rock star and was an amazing painter. I don't know any prolific male painters that can really have beautiful ladies around them and worship them. I've never heard of anything like that. Really. No. Have you?
Yes. Yes.
He was very dynamic. My mother was actually the brain trust. She was a brilliant woman, and but found herself in this thing that she basically spent. She carried a lot of shame. Carried a lot of shame for it, 1,000%. And
for introducing her children to that environment, or for
I think for trying to just live differently, trying to be different, and she carried it. Whereas I was offended by the people doling out the shame. I said, "Have you seen your shoes? Have you seen your square-toed dress shoes, sir?" Like for me, it just went to their brain. It's like the way. Because I was very offended that for me, and kind of, I guess, how we grew up, and hopefully everyone here, when you see maybe a unique insect or something, or a beautiful bird that you've never seen before, it was very much, for me, we would get out our magnifying glass and look at this and study it. And my father used to have this game, we called it hunting, he called it hunting for colors. And we would go out, and the game was, as children, you had to look for 5 shades of cerulean, what fit under that category. Now you go and find me 5 shades of amber. Now you go find me this, and then put the words that go with this in Italian. But, so it was interesting. But when I got to the States, it was very much, and I was small, but I had short hair, and they had these giant pickup trucks, and they were shooting at me with rock salt from the trucks. They would try to run me over, and I was a child, and it was so quick. It was with such lightning speed. It was like they saw something, and it just glitched. It was just, and the answer was like, smash it. And for me, I found the fact that these were the people, like, how dare you? Like, yes, obviously there were some strange things, okay, that happened there. Absolutely. I didn't know the scope of it at that time, but I was very offended that,
that you were living in
a square church lady named Marge was casting judgment. I thought that was the height of absurdity, frankly.
Yes, absolutely. Because you came into what must have seemed like a much more prosaic and brutal environment.
Brutal and absurd and funny, but like in an absurdist way. And I've done one of my first films was quite insane looking and visually, but it felt completely normal to me to have these strange, unique sets, these strange, unique characters, a strange environment. That felt normal to me. Anything that was basically felt like control or rigid, and I just could see how these people, it didn't seem to make them happy to live this way. So it's really, it's kind of, and I know here they call it a tall poppy syndrome a bit, but I think there it's different now. It has changed a bit in that way, but at that time, mid 80s, the US, it was, and where we were, it was violent.
And so to you thought, well, who are you judging my upbringing as a cult when I can see you doing all of these things?
You are the cult.
Yeah, the same way.
Right.
You're all behaving in the same way, and some of the ways that you're behaving is far more damaging than anything that I saw growing up. How did you get from there to Hollywood?
A train. I was skipping school when I was, I'd already, had quite a extraordinary life before 14 in Hollywood. I'd already had a lot of unique beats, I would say. And that one was I was skipping school. I saw a flyer that said you could make $35 for being an extra. I didn't know what that was, but I knew there was a way out of this scholastic situation that I didn't like being in. So I went, and I met a very unique young actor on that, and his mother, and they brought me down there. I had one line in a Disney film. I found those people deeply creepy and unnerving, and that it was Disney, and they wouldn't give the extras any coffee, and it was night, and it was cold. And I knew that Disney has a lot of money. They could afford coffee. I found that offensive, so then I, off with that. I had some more crazy life experiences, and then I had a boyfriend. He was killed. I was standing in front of a wall crying, and this woman said, "You should be an actress. Are you an actress?" And I just looked at her, and and I've said this in my book. I always knew my life was kind of like this old video game, Legend of Zelda, where you picked up different tools for survival or defenses or weapons as you went along. And that's kind of how I perceived my life from a young age, that there was always going to be something I needed all of these lessons and strengths for, this unique skill set.
Yes.
I always knew I was going to be famous.
How did you know? Just sensed it?
No, I just knew that it was the way into the mechanism.
Oh. So you came out of a closed community, came into the larger community and went, this is just a bigger version of that. How do I pick the lock here so that I can become influential or not in this marginalized, going along with what everyone else does position? I become famous. Because could you see those people had more autonomy, or did it appear that they did? Or was that where the influence was? What was going on? Can you analyze that?
No, I wanted to break their system.
Wow.
I found it offensive.
Wow. So that was the strategy.
It was,
Get
and
in.
there's a point, it's kind of like you've seen the movies of undercover detectives where they lose all sense of who they were or are in their regular life with their family, and they go into this kind of, and that actually happened through so many characters. In time, I'd actually quite gotten disassociated from the original kind of mission, but once it was like this insistent ringing in my head at one point it was kind of like me trying to get back into me, and it was wake up, wake up. Wake up, it's time, wake up, it's time.
So you, to a certain extent, put yourself into something of a trance so that you could be this double agent. And
No way. I don't know if I could ever clearly articulate every step to myself. It was just something, I did grow up with utopian idealists. I do and still believe things can be better than they are, if for no other reason than just because we can. Sometimes it's not that deep, but I was really offended. I really saw, and I studied classic film. We were taken to a lot of revival cinema growing up. You could see decade by decade, going back from the beginning, how they steered society. And if you understand history in different areas, whether it's US history, European history, Asian, you can see how actually it is the messaging system for the mind. It always has been. And eventually, as the screens get smaller and smaller and smaller, and then they're here and you're there, and that is the ultimate goal. And I could see how the expansion and contraction of society, of whether, you could see Cruising, the movie, coming out maybe 2 or 3 years before AIDS hit, right? There's things which would be then everyone, this is how you behave. It's like, oh, now we're free to do this. And it steers it. It's there's a point where it has to be a conspiracy fact. Because it can't be a theory anymore, because there's too many patterns to recognize there. And they also had fun times too. It wasn't just this crazy, thing, but it was also the overriding mission was, I think, really formed from a young age by my resentment at this kind of fake reality pushed on people. Whether they bought into it or not, it's still there as a specter.
did you enjoy acting?
I did, sometimes. I did enjoy, it was always really remarkable when I had no formal training, but I got a book on astral projection when I was 11. So I would do that. I would just kind of whisk away, let something else take over. And I was an odd child. I had a lot of friends. No. And so for that there was times when it felt quite electric, but other times, for me, I didn't have the normal acting experience because I had this unfortunate stalker situation from the beginning of our talk, that lovely person who just was relentless because I never signed an NDA, and I just from the earliest, I was like, this is not my shame. So it was always, I would do something and it was found that this person bought off media against me for like almost 2 decades. Paid off journalists all over the world to, I'll buy your story, I will turn this into an Oscar-winning film, I will hand you the keys to this beautiful city and life. In trade, this is my hit list. My name was number 1 with a red line through it. So if this person comes out in anything, if you see them on a red carpet, if they're walking down the street in paparazzi, please do make sure they're called a crazy drug addict whore.
Oh my God.
Or I would be attached to something, or to work with a person that really inspired me as an artist. But it would get dismantled and then destroyed and blamed on me. It was just and I was very confused. I didn't understand what was happening exactly. I knew there were strange things, but I couldn't perceive the levels that had been gone to for so long.
And this is because you wouldn't sign an NDA against this producer?
It was more involved than that. I think it was just became an obsession for this person. And to be fair, he was right. He was frightened of me.
He was frightened of you because he saw that you would not toe the line and shut up.
I didn't value what they valued.
So you presumably all know the producer that she's talking about. And he then set the machine against you. Oh, that was my microphone. He set the machine against you in order to discredit you, so that if and when you spoke out, whatever you would say would be seen as the mad ramblings of an addict.
And it's and orchestrate things like being, and not just with me, but his other, he would orchestrate being somewhere where he could put his arm around you on a red carpet, and you're there with 100 photographers, and this thing, so he just smile. And so he'd pile up advance evidence to the contrary. Like, it was a very bizarre.
So you'd be on a red
special
carpet,
interest.
he'd sweep in.
And not just to me, this happened to
lots
numerous
of other
people.
women, yes.
And but, yeah.
One thing that really fascinated me...
But he was the leader of that cult. And it's very hard, I think, for people to understand the level and scope of the power and tight control he had in that place.
So he became very, very powerful, someone who could, quote unquote, make you or break you. And then lots and lots of people then don't want to cross him or don't want to stand up to him or feel that they need to turn a blind eye. And because everybody is doing that at the same time, that is where the power sits. The power sits in doing nothing, saying nothing, everybody agreeing to do and say nothing. There was a brilliant lawyer and writer we came to see him just before this, called Philippe Sands. And he was saying the only thing we can't do now, because he's specifically talking about human rights, the only thing we can't do now is do nothing. Everybody has to do something, whether it's write an article, whether it's write to their MP, whatever it is that you choose to do, you have to do something, because if we're all doing something, we keep this conversation going, we keep this resistance going. And I feel like the do nothing that went on in Hollywood at the time, you had spoken out internally, is that the case? And then you got blacklisted, but there was no mechanism by which you could speak more widely. Now, I read something that has fascinated me. You said that the New York Times wanted to break the story earlier, your story earlier, because you were working on it for a very long time, and you said, no, wait, the public isn't ready yet. And what was the moment you chose where you said, go now?
Grab him by the pussy.
So fascinating to me that you understand the zeitgeist, because if you'd broken it a year before, people might have gone, oh, actress complaining, she's probably bitter.
The setup went for
cast,
years. The setup went for years that I did. I was shaking every 3 weeks. I followed journalists all over the world, from the publisher of the Hindustan Times in Delhi to the head of the Guardian, to whatever it was, all over. And they would follow me back on Twitter, but they wouldn't engage with me. But I would write essentially editorials, and that would go immediately viral. And I did that on average every 3 weeks for about 3 years. Wow. Because I needed to get people to change the lens of which they received information from me specifically. And then when I saw actually the media machine freaking out over Trump, and I thought, well, if you think that's bad.
Mm-hmm. And that was that
was actually the moment.
That was the time when people were ready to hear it. Yeah. I remember seeing that tape released. I was in the United States of America. I was actually in Washington, D.C. And I was in an airport, and I could see it coming up on a TV screen with the subtitles. And I remember thinking, he's never going to be president now, to quote Hamilton. I remember thinking, that's it, it's done. Because no man can say such a terrible thing. You can just do it, they let you. No one can say that, just women won't vote for him. I just thought, well, that's it, it's done. And decent men will go, no, that's disgusting, absolutely not. And then when he was elected, the fury, the disappointment, and all the women out on the street, just that was the big response. And that was the moment where we were ready to rise. And were you waiting for something like, were you just waiting was like an internal tide to turn? You just went, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, not yet, not yet, not yet, go. Was that how it happened? They were ready to print it when you said go?
I mean, oftentimes performers do have a sense of timing.
Yes.
I think it must have been something like that.
Yes.
But I understood in the greater show, which is the news media also, there's a point where they back themselves into a corner, and nobody wants to cover this. Who does? I never wanted to talk about it. There's so many other things that one would prefer to talk about, but sometimes it's time to have a harsh conversation.
Yeah.
And it was just enough. And I also thought if I could push this over, the goal line, then it could potentially really have some reverberating effects for the future in a different way, not just about that. It was in the first interview for my book, they said, you're the face of MeToo, and I had to ask what that was. But then all of a sudden I became the poster girl for that, which, as I've said, was not my special interest. But I understood its importance. So I thought, okay, I thought if you address the greater kind of cultural reset aspect, which is just kind of smashing at paradigms and systems, belief systems, and what was a sacred cow. And it's funny to me, there's someone I know, and he often he's an actor, and he finishes talks with saying, now make sure that you believe in yourself and you don't have to look up to Hollywood. And I think, who does? Like, really? And it has had, there are obviously some beautiful art and some amazing creators have come out of there. But the fact that in every single industry, whether it's a creative one or not, that the specter behind the scenes was always that. And it was upheld by women just as much as men.
Yes.
They work in tandem, whatever side of the political aisle you're on, in my experience.
Yes.
To keep a status quo if people are profiting. And I think, and this could go back to how I was raised. I knew I was, when I was sleeping in cemeteries when I was 12, because I ran away, I knew I had more peace than at times when I was at my most famous on television and had millions of dollars. So I knew that. And I just don't value things quite in the same way. And I think, again, if you are raised in a way that there were times in what I grew up in that were kind of like I imagine times here, really beautiful and joyful and fun and wild and dancing by the moonlight and painting beautiful plates with all these incredible like characters from, female characters from history and all these different ideas, all these things. And then you're stuck back into regular society and then you feel how strict it is and you feel how binding it is. And for me, with Hollywood specifically, it was so uptight. It was so not advanced in terms of spirit and art. It was, I do think quite possibly Europe was different, but there it was not. It was quite incredibly old-fashioned and incredibly kiss the ring of somebody that I knew was a massive off-the-charts predator that just happened to be his special interest.
Do you think you'll ever act again? Is that something you want to do?
I do find myself missing performing. Maybe I just miss astral projection. I'm not sure. I do. I liked it. I liked putting on different. I always changed my voice and my cadence, and if I couldn't find the voice of a character, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. But then it just became everything I did was anything I came out with, whether I directed my movie or an art project that was very special to me, it would be destroyed, and then the narrative crazy drug addict horror would come out. So it just, and also, it was just so opposite. I was really offended that they couldn't even be creative, to be honest. I'm like, the same narrative throughout all time. Surely we can do better.
Are you spending time here in the UK? At
times, yes. I still go between here and Mexico.
Because I feel like you could make some wonderful things here, and we would love to have you.
I would love to.
We would love to have you. On that note, would you like to ask Rose any questions? Has anybody got a question?
I know I seem scary. I promise you I'm not. Look at my small fluffy
scary
dog.
Any questions for Rose, or in fact, Polita?
Hi, Rose. You've just written an introduction to a new book about Marilyn Monroe, and I wonder if you could talk about what you had to say about Ms. Monroe and the connections between you and her and those tropes that you've been talking about so beautifully tonight.
Thank you so much, Mr. Damien Barr, one of my all-time favorite authors and humans. There's a really amazing book coming out, and the through lines of my life with one of my best longtime friends, a brilliant man named Joshua John Miller. He was the 14-year-old I made friends with on that movie set. He was a child actor, and his father was an incredible playwright. His grandfather discovered Marilyn Monroe as Norma Jean Baker and became one of her most prolific photographers as she morphed into Marilyn. And it was really something that I was actually discussing earlier about how a lot of big lives get reduced to what a tragedy. And I think, no, actually, Marilyn specifically, with her background and the chaos, but she broke free from the studio system. She started her own production company. She produced her own film. She fought so hard to be an artist. Once you are sold as a sex symbol, or once you play up into it, it's really, you can't get out of that. And so I wrote a foreword for this book that's coming out, which is very incredible and different than other Marilyn books. I wanted to, in the foreword, to reframe a little bit of always this one note, oh, so tragic, because nothing is ever. Like, there's been times that every single person here has likely had extremely challenging times and loss and these things. But then also that first time after an incredible loss that you actually hear yourself laugh, that you're almost shocked by that laughter sound. Like, that's the stuff life is made of. And we can do that on a grand scale or a small scale. So I think that's what I wrote about. Thank you, Damien.
Any other questions? Yes?
Hey Rose, I really look up to you. I was just wondering what your experience was like working on the set of Doom Generation, and just, I don't know, any advice you'd give to younger generations talking about things like sexual assault and stuff like that. So thank you.
Well, Doom Generation was the movie I was speaking of. It's a deep cut for a young person, credit. It's a really incredible movie by Greg Araki. It was his first, as it said in the title sequence, his first heterosexual movie. It pushed many, many boundaries. There were people, I think, actually at the end that came out throwing up at the first Sundance I went to with him. Because the ending, but it was just the production design, the cinematography, the wildness of it. But for me, it felt quite normal because I'd been in so many, I was a runaway into like hardcore queer subculture at, 13. And it just was, no cameras, a very different world. I would say for young people, it's a challenging time. It's a challenging time. But I would say take those joys and stitch them together like a beautiful blanket and wrap them around and know that every generation, my mother's generation, they had to hide under tables in case the nuclear bomb was going to drop on them. My generation, we saw a woman get the first woman to go up in space and blown up on live TV in front of us, and it is horrible, and they will always tell you that you've had less opportunity than the generation before. They run the same narrative. Don't buy the lie that they're selling. And stay offline as much as possible and make sure your eyes look long distance many times a day. I say that to myself too.
Very good. I think we've got time for one more.
I think she has a question over here.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
I just wondered, during the time when you were waiting for the tide to rise or the world to be ready to speak the injustice that you had inside you, did you ever get to a point where you thought, it's not going to come, I'm not going to be able to speak, I've just got to let it go? And how did you hold on to be able to find the right time to speak?
Thank you, that's a really great question. And thank you, by the way, that was beautiful when you put that forth. Rage, indignity. People from big agencies coming up to me on the street, if I was walking down the street, saying, get any good Weinstein scripts lately? Just random day, people that would scoot away from me in an event to not catch the blacklisting that I had, or I'm not sure how you're supposed to say that now. I think it was the indignity. There were times, I would actually always be the Oscars, knowing that if I'd kind of stayed silent internally, that I would be up there. But then I always thought, what trade is that? I didn't know if it would come, but I also knew that I had to get ready no matter what, and I had to be strong. And I knew it would almost, as you can see, kind of suck the life force out of me. And there would be a long fight, if I could survive this, to get back to a semblance of evenness, and more importantly, to turn the energy wheel to light. Because I refuse after a few decades of complete darkness, honestly. And creating within that shadow. I love and I'm proud of what I created, but it was hard, yes. And it was a really brilliant journalist named David Carr, actually, that was his name, for the New York Times, and he died, unfortunately, too young. And I think, I waited for someone else to do it also. I was hoping, I was like, please. And I was like, all right. And it was just, if we're gonna do this, we're gonna go hard. And it was just the relentless nature. And I knew, and very, very clear that I was representing a large swathe of the population that had been silenced for millennia on some levels. And that I was not speaking just for myself. and that I was also very okay. I'd been trained to be hated. I'd had vitriol, my way from various things for so long that I knew I could take it, because I knew how I was. And I knew if they were running the crazy drug addict, whore, bad girl of Hollywood, I was the one at home watching, old Charles Lawton's, my favorite film, or Shirley Temple films, or whatever it was. I knew I wasn't. I think it's also certitude in who you are, and certainty in who you are. And that can become an immovable strength. No matter how big the thumb is over you, you can get out of it. And I'm really, really proud and honored to be here and to turn the energy wheel around with a funny and brilliant and genius woman like you. Thank you very much.
Bless you.
La más hermosa.
I do think, as one cult kid to another, that some people don't survive it. Some people need to rest and restore and for the rest of their lives, and those things are valid. And if you can push through from whatever trauma is in your past or in your present or in your purview as a young person trying to survive in a world where you're looking at AI and climate change and not knowing how to navigate it, the best thing you can do is alchemy. Turn that pain, that trauma, those challenges, those obstacles into art, yes, into activism, into something in between, into something new that you invent. Because when you said, I wanted to become famous because I knew I had to dismantle it from the inside, that was a prophecy. And you had no idea how that would happen, but to a large extent, that's what you did. It's never going to be the same again. We've seen it. We've seen behind the curtain. So even though there are still abuses going on, there's still power abuses going on, there's still cover-ups going on, we've seen behind the curtain. We know who the Wizard of Oz is now. And he's not some great big guy. He's just a guy. He's just a he's just a little guy behind the curtain, and now behind a much heavier prison-like curtain. And I feel like that is making something of a human life. All human life has such trauma. All human life has suffering. Can you spin it into gold that communicates to other people, you are not alone? And thank you, Rose. Thank you for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. It's just been so remarkable to have you here in this tent in Sussex, in the heart of the countryside, and everything that happened, the ripples reached us here and to here firsthand has been extraordinary. So thank you so much. Thank you, Deborah. I believe you're both going to be signing books at the bookstore.
We didn't know that, but we're very happy to sign books. Also, can I just say my podcast is called The Guilty Feminist, and we're doing a series at the moment called The Road to Gilead, which is what I think we're on. And we've got to turn it around. And we've had some incredible guests, professors of fascism, experts in AI surveillance. So all those podcasts are free. You can just listen, just go to the Guilty Feminist feed. They're all there, they're all free. My book is not free, please buy it. And that's the way you can support me. And Rose.
This is beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've brought one for you that I'm going to sign. It's about where we are and where I think we could go. And I do think, the more I think about it, the more I think the reason that fascists first stop thinkers, artists, writers is because, and why they're banning books in America at the moment, and in Manchester banning books out of libraries, great books, is because anyone who can imagine a different future, envisage something different, says the status quo isn't absolutely the only thing there can be, isn't necessary. And that's why they fear it. So please keep buying books, reading books, and writing from your own imagination, using your own imagination. Please don't use AI to find out what you look like as a Muppet. Imagine what you look like as a Muppet is just drinking the water and fucking our brains and giving money to the cunts. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that here.
I was going to say, yes, yes.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been truly wonderful. And can we have a big round of applause for Melissa? She puts everything together.
Melissa.
She's amazing. And the whole team. There's an amazing team.
Thank you.
Thank you. have been listening to The Guilty Feminist with me, Deborah Frances-White, and my very special guest, Rose McGowan. The Guilty Feminist theme tune was composed by Mark Hodge. The producer for The Spontaneity Shop was Tom Selinsky. Thanks to Ned Sedgwick, Gina DCO, Zainab Mohammed, Sarah Beneteau, everyone at the Charleston Festival, and all of you for listening. For more information about this and other episodes, visit guiltyfeminist.com.